Hey, today we have another relationship advice story. This one is about a mother who is concerned about her daughter and an older fellow bonding over a traumatic experience. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Here we go. This story is titled, My 45 Female Daughter 18 Female Survived a Shooting. Now she has begun a relationship with a fellow survivor, 34 male, and I am very uncomfortable with the age difference and his obvious control in the relationship, but he is clearly helping her mental health. And he understands the trauma she went through. Hello everyone, I am going to try and go into as much detail as I can while still protecting my daughter and all other involved parties' privacy. I have talked about this to my friends, and I think it would be useful to also get younger people's perspective on this situation. I am 45 female. My daughter, 18, Abigail, was involved in a shooting 3 years ago at a concert she went to with her friend and her friend's older sister. My daughter was hurt and her friend tragically passed. Abigail never really came back from it. She is suffering from severe PTSD, and had difficulty in almost all social situations. She would barely speak, she would have frequent panic attacks, nightmares, and was terrified of going out, even to Target or the grocery store. Our entire family is dedicated to supporting her mental health. She has a wonderful team of therapists, and one of them suggested she go to a support group for survivors of mass shootings. About 2 years ago she went to her first meeting where she met Evan, 34 male, who had lost his fiancée in the same shooting. Over the past 2 years Evan and Abigail have become closer and closer. A few weeks after she turned 18, they announced that they were dating. I am incredibly uncomfortable with their large age difference, more so because Evan is so take charge in their relationship. He speaks for her, answers for her, orders her food for her. However, my daughter seems content in her relationship. She doesn't like speaking, so she doesn't mind someone speaking for her and making decisions for her. The reason why I am so torn about this is because Evan is, very clearly, wonderful at taking care of her. He manages to calm her down in a way the rest of us cannot. Her nightmares subside when he's around, she seems calmer and happier. It's incredibly hard to see my daughter be with someone who is closer to my age than hers. But I also know that the tragedy they both experienced is something that bonds them in a way that most of us cannot understand. I have spoken to her therapist, psychologists, and some of my close friends for insight. Now I would greatly appreciate input from people closer to her age. Thank you all. Comment 1. Over the past 2 years Evan and Abigail have become closer and closer. A few weeks after she turned 18, they announced that they were dating. This would make lots of people uncomfortable. The average person 30 plus has zero interest in being close to a teenager, let alone date them. Given that they met when your daughter was 16, this is quite concerning. He speaks for her, answers for her, orders her food for her. However, my daughter seems content in her relationship. She doesn't like speaking, so she doesn't mind someone speaking for her and making decisions for her. The younger person in this sort of age gap relationship usually doesn't mind, simply because they don't know what red flags actually look like. I have spoken to her therapist, psychologists, and some of my close friends for insight. Now I would greatly appreciate input from people closer to her age. Thank you all. I'm teaching teenagers your daughter's age, and I'd strongly suggest you do some family therapy where you open up about your concerns, and also show her resources like loveisrespect.org. It's also important to ask her the hard questions, besides the trauma. How do they actually relate? What does she think that she can offer a 34-year-old? What about life stages, timelines, maturity and life experience gap? Does she know what grooming is? Comment 2. The age gap, especially given that she was a minor when they met, makes me extremely uncomfortable and worried. I would be concerned about grooming. The fact that they waited until so soon after she turned 18 makes me fear that there was some level of intimacy, even if that was just emotional, prior to their relationship becoming official. She is extra vulnerable due to the trauma she faced to things like grooming. Even if the guy's grooming was unintentional, has either of them ever brought up their age gap or how they met or how they started to date? Ignoring the age gap, I would also be concerned that he is hindering her progress instead of helping it. On one hand, he is alleviating her anxiety, on the other, he is creating an environment that could breed grounds for her forming a codependent relationship. What would happen if they would ever break up? How would she cope if he's not around? I'm curious as to what the therapists you have spoken to have said. I'm sure you feel like you are in an extra tough spot because you want your child to be happy after suffering such a traumatic event, but you have valid concerns about how this relationship formed and is existing. Comment 3. I can see why this is concerning you. I'd be worried about her too, if I were in your shoes. I bet that she thinks nobody else can understand me like Evan can, and that he makes her feel safe. Her safe, unsafe radar is probably a little wonky due to the trauma and her age, i.e., due to trauma she probably perceives safe things as unsafe fairly often. And because she's still developing, she doesn't have a ton of life experience to help her identify unsafe things. It sounds like you've done almost everything you can, talking to the rest of your family and her care team. Have you expressed your concerns to her? You could tell her exactly what you've posted, and lay it out like, I promise I'm only going to bring this up once. And I recognize that it might be a weird road to go down, but I'm saying it because I'm genuinely concerned and I love you more than anything on this earth, so please hear me out. Then say your piece, step back, and concentrate on you. You don't have to endorse this relationship in order to love your daughter, or to want what's best for her. I recognize that parents want to shield and guide their children, and while that's a noble desire, it's not always possible once they reach adulthood. You can't predict the future or see into others' heads, but what you can do is continue to be there for your daughter, be involved in her mental health care. And remind her constantly that you love her no matter what. If things do go south with Evan, she's going to need you, and if you've been there in a supportive way throughout, it'll be easier for her to turn to you. Remind yourself of the love you have for her, and of her resiliency. Remember that you can't predict with 100% accuracy how this relationship is going to shake out, but two things that will never change are how much you love your child. And the lengths you'd go to in order to help her if she reaches out to you. Tell her that, and it's enough. Comment 4. Sorry to say, but he was probably dating her before 18 and they only announced it once she was legal. This reeks of grooming and abuse. I'm 35 and teenagers seem like babies to me. If I met one in a survivor group, I would only treat them like a kid brother or sister. He's 1000% gross to prey on her and not have some freaking boundaries and morals. As for advice, your daughter might not leave him even if you present evidence of his grooming behavior. If she rejects the evidence, then focus on how to help her gain confidence and independence. DHR might be in denial because of her fears and anxiety, aka he's preying on a vulnerable woman which is also sick, regardless of the age. Keep the focus on her future goals. Okay, he makes phone calls for her and takes care of her, but where does she see herself in 2 to 3 years? Does she want to go to college or have a career? He cannot hold her hand for the rest of her life because one of them might be stuck at work or something. Even if they stay together, a grown woman will need to do some of these things that still stress her out. Constantly encourage her to take small risks to establish her own independence. Encourage her to try ordering food for once. Or to call the dentist. Have her try cooking new recipes or buy new clothes. Things she should have control over, not him. Also encourage her to build a solid support group of friends. The more outside point of views she gets, the less normal his behavior will seem. And when she wants to leave, she'll have people there to help catch her. Encourage her to meet friends in this support group or online. If this guy loves her so much, he shouldn't have a problem with that, right? Constantly encourage her to seek therapy, build a support network, and to learn to feel comfortable making everyday decisions that help establish her individuality and independence. The guy won't like it, but if you come from the angle of helping her anxiety and trauma, then hopefully he'll stay quiet and she'll take some good solid baby steps. If she won't leave him right now, then think of ways to help her heal and get the courage to do it eventually. Finally, make sure she's on birth control and isn't trying for a baby. This is the kind of guy to get her pregnant to keep her trapped. Go from the angle of her trauma and anxiety and how awful it would be on her to have a crying baby around and sleepless nights. Be very blunt. This is probably all a lot to take in, but you are 100% right to be concerned. It's not normal at all. Please help your daughter in any way you can. Comment 5. I survived a school shooting when I was 18 and I'm now 32, so I can help offer perspective. I absolutely agree there are concerns with the age gap and, being in my 30s now, it is extremely weird that a man that age wants to date someone who is barely an adult. You very much have a right to be concerned. Experiencing that level of trauma hinders your perspective and, like your daughter, I suffered from PTSD, which mostly manifested as paranoia. And struggled to overcome it because everyone else who experienced the same trauma at my university did not want to talk about it. It's not surprising your daughter has latched onto somebody who experienced the same trauma, because it is a huge struggle when those in your life do not understand how you feel. My husband has, not intentionally, been insensitive to my feelings even years after the shooting because he does not fully understand. Never would I want him to understand, but it is hard when nobody in your life gets it. Focus on getting her to talk about the logistics of this relationship. How does she see this working long term? What else do they have in common besides this shared traumatic experience? Experiencing such a trauma at a young age does make you more blind to other red flags because you think, how worse could it get? Keep conversations going with your daughter and encourage her to keep going to individual therapy. That is absolutely critical. Thank you so very much for listening. Please check out my other videos and like and subscribe.